All right. Well, happy Friday, everyone. It's time for another one of our series in the Pandemic Survival Guide for Residential Contractors. So I'm your host, and I'm not David Luperger. So I'm looking at our show of attendees here. I see some people. I see some clients. Hey, Marcos. Hey, Mark's on. Hey, how about that? All right, so let me see. Give me a show of hands. Are any of you new? Have any of you not been on the podcast lately? Show of hands. Let's see if we've got anyone that has new people. All right, there we go. A couple of them on Marcos, but Marcos knows who we are. Okay, well, we're gonna do a little bit of an introduction anyway. So here's the story, guys. For those of you that are returning dedicated people, this is our 13th webinar, by the way. You know that we are down a person, right? And so even though it says that I am David Luperger, I am not David Luperger, I am Ed Earl. But our colleague, David Luperger, is actually in Maine visiting his son. Now, why did he choose Maine? Well, because Maine has the lowest infection rate next to Hawaii, which is where our other partner is from, which is Paul. So anyway, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Ed Earl. I'm coming to you from beautiful, sunny San Diego, California, where I run a construction management company. I also have an MBA from Stanford, but don't hold that against me. And I'm also a business coach with that works with residential contractors with my two colleagues, Paul and David. So I'm going to now turn it over. This is an international webinar. We're going to go all the way to Finland, and I'm going to turn it over to Paul Sanneman.
Okay, I am in Finland, and I'm here because my wife's Finnish, and they gave us, there's this ranch, it's like, 100 years old or whatever. They gave us some properties, we built a house here. So we live in Finland in the summer, which is the only time to be in Finland, otherwise the weather's horrible. And then Hawaii the rest of the time, except for time Palm Springs. So that's my story. And I've been doing this for 30 years. And the interesting about Finland is it's COVID free. It's really weird. There's like no masks, no nothing. It's a really good place to be at the moment in the world because there's like zero COVID here, which is pretty amazing. So it's all good.
And no masks either, right? No one's wearing masks?
No nothing. They've done it. I mean, Finnish people really follow rules really well. So when it first started, they say stay at home, and everybody stayed at home. Nobody even questioned it. They all stayed at home. Nothing happened. And now they've only been in the country. I mean, you can't get in the country, but other than that, it's cool. So
yeah,
I think they had like 2 cases last month or something. It's insane. So, 5 million people. That's all good.
Man. All right, and as I said, we're down a man this week. Our colleague David Luperger is we gave him the week off. So between the three of us, we've got 95 years of experience. That just means that we're all a bunch of old guys. Yeah. So the purpose of this webinar is to really be able to give you up-to-date information. When we started this in March, I think at least me and probably Paul and David as well felt like, we'll do this for a month or two, and then once we all kind of get through this, we'll stop the webinar. But what's happened, obviously, we all know, is that everything related to the pandemic continues to be a moving target. Everything keeps changing, as you're going to find out here shortly. Just regards to the PPP program, there have been 4 major announcements and changes since our last webinar just 2 weeks ago. So that's really the purpose of this webinar, is to give you the latest and greatest up-to-date information. We currently work with over 50 contractors nationwide, so we really have our pulse on the local construction markets in every area of the U.S. Even one of our clients in Canada, I heard from this week, they're having a lumber shortage up in Canada. So anyway, so that's the purpose here of the webinar. So as I've done in the past, I want to start with a little bit of humor. Although David isn't here, he actually gave me these jokes, so we can blame David if we don't like them. So let me get this straight. There's no cure for a virus that can be killed by sanitizer and hand soap. How is that, right? Kind of strange.
I heard a comment the other day that we'll probably find the cure for this virus about the same time we find the cure for the common cold. And how long have we looked for that one?
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. So this is a funny one, right? So when this virus thing is over, I still want to stay away. I still want some of you to stay away from me. I think that's true. I kind of feel like that sometimes too. I'm probably more of an introvert than an extrovert, but I have to say that, like, sometimes I haven't missed, some of the parties that have gotten canceled and some of the things that I haven't been able to do. Although my weekends are much more boring these days. All right, and these last few weeks have taught us anything. It's that stupidity travels faster than any virus on the planet. As we've unfortunately seen so many areas, including my area of the country, as a number of infections have risen, and now actually even the hospitalizations and deaths are rising as well. We got to realize, folks, we are not through this yet. There is no end in sight yet. So, all right, just wait a second. So what you're telling me is that my chance of surviving all this is directly linked to the common sense of others? How does that work? That's unfortunately where we are right now. So we're going to talk about masks a little bit later in the webinar, but we're going to stay away from politics. So, all right. So as we always do, let's check and see where we can work. Well, good news is things really haven't changed in the last month as far as where things are happening with work. Now, speaking in Southern California, they've now shut bars back down, restaurants, you can't eat inside in restaurants. So we're definitely seeing a step back. But what I'm seeing quite clearly, and as I'm reading reports throughout the nation, people have realized that we can't really close the businesses again. So while they're closing bars and restaurants and trying to prevent the spread that way, I highly doubt that the residential construction industry is going to get shut down in any state, regardless of how much worse the infections get. Unless we get to the point where the stay-at-home orders happen again, which I'm hoping is not going to happen. I think they've really realized now that there are so many other economic costs from these stay-at-home orders, economic costs, mental health costs, that it's not just about trying to save lives from reducing the coronavirus infections. So, all right, well, let's move right into the PPP. Let's see a show of hands. Have any of you in the last 2 weeks received money from the PPP? I'm guessing probably not many of you, because of all of you have been following this webinar, you're already on top of this and you've received your PPP money. Okay, well, regardless of whether you received the money in the last couple of weeks or have received it at any time, there were a lot of changes and improvements and rulings in the last a couple of weeks. So let's go over them. So the first thing that happened was on June 22nd, the SBA issued what they're calling, I love this, the new interim final rules. Now, how is that for an oxymoron? The new interim final rules, right? Which clarified some issues and attempts to make complete loan forgiveness attainable for most borrowers.
Right? These are clearly not the final rules. They're just the interim final
rules. Yeah, they're the interim final rules, you know?
Done.
Exactly. Yeah, crazy. All right, then if that wasn't enough, then 3 days later, the Treasury releases another FAQ. So the FAQ are these frequently asked questions. And the Treasury has been issuing these since April. And every few weeks, they issue another FAQ. So they added one more FAQ, I think they're up to 28 or 29 or something, that talked about the maturity of the loans based on when the SBA loan number was assigned. So for those of you that may think that you're not going to get it fully forgiven, well, I'm going to cover this in a minute. So those were the couple of things that happened in June. The biggest thing that happened was on July 4th, in between him visiting Mount Rushmore, President Trump signed a new law extending the PPP loans from June 30th, they were supposed to expire on June 30th, now to August 8th. So that's great news. There's still $130 billion that remains in the program. Now, for those of you that are wondering, there is not yet any further action. If you recall from our last webinar, I talked about this Prioritized Paycheck Protection Program, the P4 Act, another wonderful acronym our government has come up with. That's going to actually allow borrowers to apply for a second PPP loan. That was approved by Congress on June 18th, but it hasn't yet been approved by Trump. But let's keep our fingers crossed on that.
And then the last,
go ahead.
Congress probably has no choice but to approve that one too. That's what I've read. It's probably going to get approved again.
Yeah, yeah. And I think now, you know, with the resurgence of infections and the re-shutting downs of business, they've got to come up with something else. So that's really, I think, the only silver lining to this this kind of steps back that many parts of the country are taking, is the fact that we probably will get some more aid out of it. So, yeah. And this last thing, this is very interesting. We're going to talk about this in a minute. On July 6th, the SBA and the Treasury Department released the complete database of every single person that's gotten the PPP loan, approximately 4.9 million businesses. And I was on a call yesterday with my networking group, a couple of attorneys, and they've got some really upset clients who are actually thinking about suing the government because they said, hey, this wasn't part of the deal. This isn't public information. We didn't want our, people to know in public how much we ended up borrowing on the PPP program. And there's a very easy way to find out who was on there. I'll tell you that in a minute. All right, so let's move on. I got this from my local bank, Bank of Southern California, just this week. Just wanted to share this because I thought this was a great example of how the local banks really stepped up. As many of you recall, back in the day, Paul was trying to work with Chase and I was trying to work with B of A, and you just didn't get anywhere. So this local Bank of Southern California, they ended up doing 2,579 loans. And this is a little community bank in Southern California. That's pretty impressive. And they ended up, just their bank, loaning $485 million worth of PPP loans. So I know the VP there, and I called him and I said, hey, what's up with the forgiveness forms? You guys sent an email a couple of weeks ago that you were going to send out the forgiveness form. I'm still waiting on it. You guys were going to put together some easy to fill out online form. And he told me, he said, Ed, we've only sent that out to borrowers over 150,000. And I said, well, why is that? He said, well, because there's whisperings among the banking industry that the SBA is going to automatically forgive all PPP loans under $150,000.
Yay.
So he said, don't quote me on that. And I haven't seen this in print anywhere. So this is kind of something that's hush-hush, but you heard it here first.
Now I've noticed when I went to my Chase account, it lists the SBA loan and it says payment, right? So I called my banker and went,
right.
I don't get the payment thing. And they said, notice the payment is zero. And I went, oh, I guess it is. So they're still showing a balance and they're showing interest accruing on the SBA loan on my check, on my, my business banking account, but it keeps saying amount due zero, amount due zero. And he says, as soon as we figure it out, we haven't yet, we're going to send you a form which will allow you to get this forgiven. For the same reason, they're not sure what it's going to be either, and they don't know when it's coming out because everybody's changing their mind. So he says, just ignore it. Don't worry about it. We'll let you know in a month or so what's going on. Because I thought I had to make a payment or something, but I did not. It said zero. And he says, we'll let you know when you're going to have to do something, but don't worry about it.
Wow, interesting. All right, well, let's see a show of hands. How many of you out there, have any of you gotten a loan forgiveness request or form to fill out from your banks? Let's see if anyone's gotten one. Doesn't look like it. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Loan forgiven? I guess, Ken, has anybody got their loan forgiven officially? That's another. Raise your hand if you've had your PPP loan forgiven officially.
No one.
That's zero.
Yeah, and I think it's right. Now, Kent, I saw you raise your hand for a minute. Maybe it was a mistake, but raise your hand again if you've gotten the loan forgiveness form. Oh, Kent's raising his hand again. Wow, interesting. I'm going to see. Oh, and Kelly Berlin as well. You guys put a comment in the questions and let me know whether what's gone on, and if you're willing to, I'll unmute you and have you guys talk. So while they're doing that, let's move on. Okay, so the key thing here is this interim final rules, right? Let me explain what was in these interim final rules. So one of the things that came up is, remember how they extended the period from 8 weeks to 24 weeks? Well, it was really unclear whether it was either or, like you either had to pick 8 weeks or 24 weeks, or could you pick any time in between that? Well, these new rules are saying, look, you can pick any period that you want. It doesn't have to be 8 or 24. It can be 10. It can be 12. So that's really great, because now you can just use whatever period of time works in your favor of being able to apply that money. So the rule also explains that borrowers who received loans prior to June 5th can elect 8 weeks as the covered period to apply for forgiveness, and that borrowers have 10 months after the covered period to apply for forgiveness. So people were worried. Remember, they felt like they had to apply for forgiveness within a certain period of time. Well, now you've got 10 months to apply for forgiveness. And then also the interim final rules we talked about this in our last webinar, this new form, the 3508EZ, which is the new, very simple 2-page online EZ form. So the other thing that the interim final rules clarified is that once the application is submitted, the lender will have 60 days to make a good faith review and ask for any additional information or documentation. So, anyway, so that's that. And as I said, there's rumors that they might just forgive all the loans. All right, so Kent says, I had to search for the loan forgiveness form and got it off the PayPal site where I received the loan from. Interesting. Okay. Well, now, Paul, didn't you get it through PayPal, or did you end up getting it through Chase?
I got the Chase.
You got it through
I
Chase.
did.
Okay.
So I applied for PayPal through Chase. I got a message back from PayPal and said, you've already been funded. And I said, by who? And I got, whatever, so many $1,000, and instantly showed on my checking account. I had no idea where it was from. And I called Chase, and they finally said, oh, this is where it's from. And so I was surprised. They didn't tell me until they actually funded it.
Interesting. I know Marcos is on, and I know Marcos got it from PayPal. I'm curious to see, Marcos, if you have, if you've gotten your forgiveness, if you've submitted anything. So that's interesting. So Kent actually had to go and find it online and then submit it to PayPal. That's interesting.
I would say my advice to our listeners here is don't do anything, because it will get nothing but easier. And with any luck, they'll just send you a thing. You check off 2 boxes that you didn't steal the money and you use it accordingly, and the whole thing will be forgiven. So I would not be in a hurry to fill out any forms at all.
Yeah.
So
Kent says he ended up having his accountant fill it out. So yeah. And Jim says the form is available on the SBA website, but my bank has asked me to hold off on submitting it. So there you go, Paul. That's exactly right. Oh, and Elena said the same thing. Bank of America says they are not accepting for loan forgiveness until August. Oh, and Renee, welcome, Renee. Renee's on here too. Wells Fargo sent me an email that said I should wait for an online form because they will not accept any SBA website form. Right. Interesting. Okay, so Kent, you may end up, yeah. I think at this point the consensus is don't do anything. Let's just wait and we'll see what's going on. Okay, so this was another thing for those of you that are self-employed. Or have applied. If you recall, remember, it was very difficult to apply if you were self-employed or if you were a sole proprietor. But then they made it easier. But the problem is that they capped that at $100,000, right? So the problem was that for those that were using the $100,000 salary, remember, you could receive up to 2.5 times your normal salary amount. So your salary was capped at the $15,385. But you could have actually borrowed $20,833. So it left you with about a $5,000 shortage. So what they've done now is they've changed that, and the new rule now caps the forgiveness received by self-employed employees to $20,833. So you're no longer limited to that $100,000 if you're self-employed. So and now with the 24-week period, you basically can just run enough payrolls to be able to get it through. So for those of you that are self-employed or felt like you were going to be limited by what you could have forgiven, 2 things happen here. They raised the cap from $15,385 to $20,000, and now obviously with that 24-week period, you've got time to be able to use up all that money. Okay, will there be any other changes in the taxable aspect of the PPP? This is an interesting one too. Remember what we said, which is that the PPP loans are not taxable. However, the expenses that you use to pay those PPP are no longer deductible. So it's kind of a backdoor way to say that, you know,
it's considered, they are taxable. I mean, when
they are
give
taxable.
you,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
it's going to be added on to your income, and they are your business, and it's taxable. They're not going to.
Correct.
So the bottom line is
right.
yes, they're.
Right. They're not, I guess what you could say, they're not deductible anymore, right? So whatever payroll that you paid through the PPP program, you can no longer deduct that as an expense. So indirectly, you're picking up the tax. Well, now business groups are lobbying. Go ahead.
Well, it is taxable because it's income, and you just have to pay.
Right.
Income,
Yeah. Exactly. Right. But now business groups are lobbying furiously to make the changes to the PPP, especially on the payroll tax issue. So there, what's being called Phase 4 legislation. So there may now be a chance that they'll go back and say, all right, the payroll expenses that you paid through the PPP, you can still deduct that as an expense on your income taxes, which would be huge. But anyway, negotiations for new laws are underway and should conclude before the congressional August recess. That was the latest and greatest I got from Forbes magazine. So, all right. The other important thing was that they released a new FAQ. Remember I talked about the new FAQ? So this is interesting for any of you that think you might not be fully forgiven. The question here is, how long of a loan do you have? Remember originally the PPP was only going to be a 2-year loan? Well, now they've issued this new FAQ. If your SBA loan number was on or after June 5th, you now actually have a 5-year maturity loan. So here's the benefit of waiting. But for those of you like me that applied early on, if your SBA loan number is before June 5th, then your PPP loan has a 2-year maturity. So hopefully that's not going to be an issue for most of the people on here. But if it is, go back and look and see what the loan number, what the loan date is on your loan. So. All right, so now here's the interesting thing. Who got the money? On July 6th, the SBA and the Treasury released the complete database of the 4.9 million people that got the loans.
I would like to
over 100. Yeah.
No, nobody got any money. Got to remember that. The banks loaned all of this money, all right?
Great.
So,
yes.
So far, the government hasn't given anybody anything. That whatever, you know, $1 trillion, 190, whatever, is still sitting somewhere in some magical checking account with the government, because the government hasn't given anybody any money. All this money came from the banks. So this is a list of who the bank loaned money to, right?
Yeah. Okay. Good point. Good point. All right. So it doesn't come as any surprise, right, that there were a lot of people that got a lot of money. 43,815 restaurants across America got $13.6 billion. I was actually happy to see that because I think restaurants have really been hit hard. So also want to let you know that it was only for loans above 150,000 that they released their name, their address, their SIC codes, etc. But yesterday I found out about this website that you might want to go to. It's called pppspy.com. You go onto this website and literally you can look up any person that got a PPP loan. So what I did was I just typed in my zip code and I was, oh, really? This church got money. Oh, I didn't know that. And it's very, very interesting. So this is kind of an interesting thing. You might want to go here, pppspy.com. Type in, you know, your favorite restaurant or whoever, and you can find out who got the PPP money, how much they got. I mean, it tells you everything. So, all right, so here's the bad news. What was that?
So much for confidentiality.
Yeah, no confidentiality. So yesterday, Forbes ran this story. So Kanye West, Virginia's Governor Jim Justice, and 14 other billionaires got PPP loans. So Kanye West, Yeezy clothing line got, I think, I don't know, $4 or $5 million, and Kanye's worth $1.3 billion. So clearly the PPP system didn't work the way it was designed, and people exploited it. So that's the unfortunate reality. The good news is, like I said, there's still over $100 billion left. So, and I think now that Congress has realized and the SBA has realized they need to be more careful in reviewing those applications. So, all right, let's move over to the EIDL. I saw at the beginning of this broadcast, even before we started, someone mentioned that they hadn't gotten their EIDL. Let's see, show of hands, anyone gotten their EIDL loans in the last couple of weeks? Oh, a couple of people. Jim, Kelly, that's great. Good. Jim, oh, he did receive an EIDL loan. Oh, I thought he didn't. Oh, wow, Jim. Oh, that's great. Awesome. All right, so Jim and Kelly got their EIDL loans. Betsy did. Wow, good. Okay. We were funded on 6/29 after applying to 3 different places. We are a partnership. No one knew how to deal with it. I'm assuming, Betsy, that's in regards to your EIDL loan. Maybe give me another comment, Betsy, and let me know if that was in charge of your EIDL loan. So I'm going to share with you my feelings about the EIDL loan. You know, I started having second thoughts because once I got the loan documents and I realized that it was collateralized, I started thinking, well, this could interfere with my lender might not get happy with me. And so I kind of got a little bit of cold feet. And so I stopped my application process. So I ended up getting this email that said, basically, you know, you've gone through the whole thing. If you don't finish your loan, we're going to withdraw your application. So 2 days later, I got a phone call from the SBA. I can't believe this, but literally this Ruth Milner I see this phone number come across Washington, D.C. I almost didn't answer it. She's like, hi, Mr. Earl, this is Ruth Milner. I'm a paralegal with the SBA, and I've been charged with getting LLCs to approve their EIDL loan. So what can I do to help you get through your EIDL loan? I was amazed. And she said she was only doing LLCs, and so that's why she was talking to me. And I said, well, I explained my situation. I said, well, I'm not sure I need the money. I said, you know, I wish if I could just have that and I could draw down on it like a line of credit, but I don't need that money right now. I don't want to have to start paying interest on it. And I said, I know. And she said, well, yeah, you don't have to. It's a 12-month deferral. I said, well, but that's a deferral, right? I'm still going to accrue that interest. And she paused for a minute. She said, oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, I guess you would have to pay that interest when the time comes up in 12 months. I'm like, well, great. I said, the other thing I'm worried about is that I have, you know, that this now you guys are getting collateral on this. And she said, well, that's true. But many of our borrowers now, what they're doing is they're changing their loan amount to $24,900. And that's just below the limit. And then we don't ask for any collateral. And I said, well, that's great. How do I do that? Can I get online and do it? She said, no, you have to make a request. But if you send me an email, I will modify your loan and reduce it to the $24,900. And that way you don't have any collateral. So I said, great, please go ahead and do that. And I haven't heard from her since. I called her this morning. Of course, she didn't answer. But I started thinking, Paul, what if they do with this EIDL what they did with the PPP program? What if they say, hey, for all of you that got the EIDL that's under 24.9, we're just going to forgive it because we don't have collateral on it anyway. Who knows?
Well, then there's the other. I mean, I have a client. They said, should they take it? And I said, he really needed the cash, and it was only secured with business assets. So I said, hey, you know, because he happened to be on the edge. If you go broke, it's no big deal because it'll all be forgiven. But if you have it's business assets, but it could be a bit complicated. And any way you do it, you're dancing with, not to the government, the devil's such a bad word, that you are going to be entangled with those people. If you need the money, absolutely go for it. But unlike the PPP, it is not free money. It costs you money. And I'm sure that's why the SBA is pushing it, because they're going to get interest on these, billions of dollars, which is going to go back to the SBA, which they're excited about because it's going to make much money. Because they're actually getting paid on this thing. But I'm not, if you need it, absolutely. But if you're doing it just because it seems like a great deal, I can't think I want to get involved with the government for that. Even for $28,000, it's not that much. It's not worth it. It's not that much money.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. So Jim is saying now that we were not asked for any collateral at a $150,000 loan. Jim, check your loan documents, because all the loan documents that I've seen, it's in there. So they may not have formally asked that, and that's the issue.
They don't ask for the deed on your house.
Right.
Yeah, they're not asking for the deed on your house. They're not asking for a typical loan collateral, which is a hard asset. They don't ask for that. My experience looking at the documents is they just said this loan is secured with your business assets, whatever your business assets are. Right. It may be a car, Correct. It might be a typewriter, it might, whatever your business owns as a business is automatically secured with this loan. Anything that your business doesn't own, like your house, and if your car is out of your business, doesn't count. So most people don't have a lot of assets in their business. They have it outside their business, right. But though it's secured with those assets. And they might, if you use the conventional, like, it lists the assets like your house, it's not on there. It just says secured with business assets.
Right. It's just kind of this blanket clause that says, right, you're basically collateralizing any of your business assets. So, which you're right, Paul, you don't have many assets, or hopefully most people don't keep too much in there. But, contractors, if they own a lot of equipment, they might own a crane or a lift, or all of that technically is collateralized. Any company trucks they have would be collateralized. The other thing in my read of the documents too, Paul, is even your checking accounts technically are considered an asset. So,
it is.
Yeah. So, Jim says, yes, understood, but that's better terms than most bank terms. You're right, Jim.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so that's the thing. And that's, the screen now that I've got up here, you can see, I mean, those are the two, the EIDL and the PPP. And, and Betsy's saying it was the PPP that she got. Interesting. Okay. Wow. So she just was funded on June 29th for the PPP. Wow. Interesting. Okay. That's very interesting, Betsy. So anyway, look, that's exactly right. Even if there is collateral, these loans are still way better than anything else that you're going to get later on. And as I said, I think the longer this pandemic lasts, the more forgiving they're going to be, the more there's going to be a chance that they might suspend the interest, they might forgive part of it. So I'm really thinking that the EIDL is worth doing if, like Paul says, you've got any use or need for the funds. So, all right. Well, fortunately, we have hit our 30-minute limit. So.
Now, is there anything like, can I take the EIDL loan and buy a new car or a truck or buy a house or anything like that? Does it specify that it has to be anything for my business, or is it just free money to do with as I please, like I want to buy a house or something?
Right. So if you look on the chart here, the approved use of funds is obviously more than the PPP, because the PPP is only payroll, rent, and mortgage interest. So with the EIDL, you can use it for fixed debts, which are rents, utilities, etc. Payroll, you can use it for accounts payable. So that's pretty good, because you can pay for accounts payable. So, if you've got vendors' bills, you can use it for. I think someone asked that and said, oh, no, that was a different question. Someone asked whether if you're paying subcontractors, if that's included in the PPP. And the answer is no. You cannot, by the way, you can't pay subcontractors through the PPP. Only people that are on your payroll. But yes, no. So you can use the EIDL for accounts payable and for some bills that could have been paid had the disaster not occurred. But no, you can't use it to go buy lots or buy a new truck or something like that. For those, it's the other Section A loans that we mentioned on the last webinar. That's the one that you would want to use, which is another SBA loan that you can apply for as well. So. All right. Well, I'm going to give you a little preview. Paul and I had an epiphany this week in working with one of our clients who actually is been diagnosed with coronavirus. But we realized how the pandemic has changed how we make sales presentations, right? So this is a typical one. You know, there's the contractor in front of the young couple at their home making the presentation. Obviously, you can't do that anymore, at least not without masks on. And so we have come up with some very interesting ideas that we're going to share with you on the next webinar of how the pandemic has changed our presentation. All right. So
we have found that actually some marketing is way better now that there's a pandemic, and way cheaper, easier, faster, better. So there's some real upsides to marketing in this pandemic, and we'll talk about those next week. But we've come up with some ways. The pandemic makes everything way easier and cheaper than it used to be, and the pandemic has actually helped the marketing a lot. And we'll tell you how if you tune in 2 weeks.
Right, exactly. All right, one last thing from Kelly. Kelly says, so the PPPspy.com is not showing everyone. We and some fellow businesses who have received the PPP through my same lender are not on the list. So I'm curious. So I think the deal, Kelly, is if you're, because I couldn't find myself either, I think it's only the over 150,000 that are on that PPP Spy website. So anyway, all right, we've got a bunch of questions here. I think I covered most of them. If you have any other ones, please feel free to reach out, to call us or email us. I'm going to put up our contact information again. We respond to every email, every phone call that we get from our webinar participants. And so if you have any other questions, please let me know. I'll go through these questions from the webinar too, and if there's any others that I need to answer, I'll shoot you an email. So, all right. So just wanted to remind you that we are doing these webinars now every other week, and so we will do this again 2 Fridays from now at 11 a.m. Pacific and 2 p.m. Eastern. So thank you again for all of you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on July 24th. And remember, wear your mask. Okay.
Oh, and I think that this is not going away, and we all wish it would, but I don't think it's going away. So we're going to have to learn how to do business and successfully do business under new circumstances. The idea of waiting for it to go away, it's like, I'm sure when they find the cure to the common cold, this will be along with it. But so far, they haven't done well in the last 10 years or 15 years. So I think it's time for us to say, this is going to be around. It isn't going to go away. So let's learn how to adapt to make, lemonade out of lemons. And there's things we can do to do better during the pandemic than we did before it.
Yeah. All right, folks. We'll look forward. We'll give you more details as well on our next webinar. We'll look forward to seeing you all in 2 weeks. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye.